The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. It'd be really easy to pick apart DSTLRY, this new comic company. But, in an attempt to be fair, I've struggled back and forth. I wanted to do this video for a bit, kind of giving my impressions of some of their ideas, which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones are gimmicks. There's a lot of each of those. I think, I talk about comics needing to innovate. So not to be a hypocrite, this group is trying to do some new, somewhat innovative things. And it's easy to point at those and go, well, that's a terrible idea. And some of them are. But, on the bright side, and this kind of be the last time I make this disclaimer in this video, at least people are trying something new. So first of all, what is DSTLRY? It's pronounced DSTLRY, even though it's an internet name, DSTLRY, because, you can trademark that, basically. It's a new comic publisher. It's from former Comixology executives David Steinberger and Chip Mosher. And basically, the goal or the stated hype is that this creates a more equitable platform for creators. And then there's, an element of collectability to digital books. So DSTLRY kind of went out with some big names, undoubtedly some of these from kind of relationships they had at Comixology. So it's got Scott Snyder, it's got James Tynion, it's got Ram V, it's got Mirka Andolfo, it's got Joelle Jones, thankfully he's in Blacklist from here. It's got Jock, Becky Cloonan, Brian Azzarello, Jamie McKelvey, and a number of others, Lee Garbett. So, a handful of people. And then the Will Dennis, who you may know as a former DC editor, has been named the DSTLRY founding editor. And then it will have an advisory board and all that kind of stuff. So, the key here, there's two kind of parts of it. There's the digital aspect and the innovation they're doing there, which is kind of curious to look at. And then there's the business proposition that is meant to be more creator friendly. So basically, the press or the quote goes: "Comic creators have historically received the short end of the stick when they create great characters and storylines for traditional publishers. DSTLRY is a truly creator-owned endeavor, with creators co-owning the company their creations fuel. It makes sense that as creators, they help build the brand and they receive equity." All right, so because, many people promoted this as, hey, it's Image Comics, which it is, and basically the creators owning full rights to their work at Image. But DSTLRY basically says, in addition to that, the company is setting aside 3% of its equity over the first 3 years to be distributed among the founding creators. And unless I missed it, there's not a lot of heavy details around how that distribution takes place or all that it goes. But here's the piece, as I kind of related to a somewhat heartbroken creator a little bit ago, of, getting equity in a company is certainly a good thing, but it is a private company, meaning that equity is speculative. Let's just put it that way. So one of two things either has to happen. One of three things. Either the company is inherently proven enough value that somebody would be willing to buy your stake, your equity stake from you for monetary value. That could be one of the other founding creators, could be someone else. There's probably some bylaws and some restrictions on stock. Stock doesn't just, stock typically is non-transferable. And I would bet a decent amount of money that if the creators are getting equity, they can't pass or sell that equity without company approval or without board approval, which in general, boards will resist, because otherwise, somebody could get a decent equity stake. Now, keep in mind, the equity that's being put out here is 3%, shared among everyone. Not everyone gets 3%. Somebody was telling me that. It's like, wow, they're giving Scott Snyder 3% of the company. No. They're giving Scott Snyder a piece of the 3%. So either you're going to get money by either selling or transferring it, which in all honesty is probably not that much money if you're even allowed to do so, and chances are you're not. The second way you can make money is some big investment firm comes in and basically buys up parts of the company, and you're able to sell your equity to that, that private equity fund or that investment bank, whatever, who's doing the deal. And that's another way to go about it. Again, based on the premise here, a big investment bank or VC fund or something, it's unlikely they would come in to want to buy this unless, as a whole, there was tangible value. If the creators are owning their stake, the creator can make a deal based on their comic. They wouldn't, the company is somewhat irrelevant at that point. So equity in the company itself has mixed value. The third way you make money, and probably the most logical path, or at least the one that's most common, is that the distillery gets either purchased or goes public, purchased outright, and then somebody would have to buy up that equity. Again, 3%, a share of 3%, that company would have to be bought for a lot, and so to put it to you in extremely irresponsible layman's terms, and I say that because there's all these caveats. If somebody in theory came in and paid $100 million for this company, which would be a massive deal for comics and that you would not see, but if let's say somebody did, and let's say you owned, 1/3 that 3% of equity, which nobody's getting that high a number, but let's say you did, that'd be basically 1%, which means you could be owed $1 million, which would be pretty nice. However, it wouldn't work that way because the people who are going to dip in first to get their money are going to be people who are, who had put the money up first place, any kind of, Series A, or there's usually a number of people who come in earlier than you to get their money. And, you would also pay capital gains, depending on what is bought. There's much of different pieces there. So you wouldn't be walking away with $1 million. Keep in mind, of that 3% of equity, there's all those creators that were named, but they're still saving some back. So chances are of that 3%, I don't know how much stock they're dividing up. It's not a lot. So in general, it's an interesting idea to give people equity. And I've certainly mentioned you can give people stock options and things like that. But that works for a company like DC or Marvel. It's a lot more questionable here. These guys are former Comixology guys, arguably probably made a decent amount of money when Amazon came in and bought Comixology. But that was a bit of a different play. And you had a lot less shares, in the mix. And you weren't getting like, 0.25%. But the other piece in all this that is worth talking about, so that's the first kind of hook, but I think it's mainly an illusionary hook. To be frank, I think it's one that is meant to sound like it's favorable to creators, but really isn't. I think that in terms of the creators owning the rights to their work, full stop. If it looks similar to Image, you could make a case that you would arguably have more promotion or more value in just going to Image in the first place. So the question mark would be, what does DSTLRY offer you outside of equity in the company, which has mixed value? What do they offer you to actually make your own property more valuable? But at any rate, the digital side of the world is where you have a little bit more innovation and kind of crazy innovation. It says new issues will only be sold for a limited time as digital, at which point owners can sell and trade their books on a digital marketplace. The story calls it StubHub for comics, which I think is a terrible analogy. This is NFTs for comics, and creators will receive a portion of the resale price. Story's books will also be sold in print form. Physical digital collectibles were released online and in comic shops. So this is, by the way, a big portion of this is somewhat of an NFT-like play. You're talking about digital scarcity as something that is pushing kind of the market up. That's questionable. How that will all work. And it really kind of relies on the idea that digital collectibles will continue to hold their value. And I think there's a lot of question marks of whether that will be true or not. I think there's a reasonable argument to be made that it will not. And this whole premise here won't really stop piracy. That's still going to occur. So you're talking about a digital book that somebody has believed has inherent collectible value, which I don't know. I put it this way. There's a lot of elements in there that are a little bit unproven. The part that's a little bit crazy to think about is the idea that, the back issue, basically a back issue or a digital comic that's come out and bought by someone and someone resells it, that it's giving the creator a chance to take a percentage of that money. And I don't have the number of how much, percentage they're getting, but the idea that now, the back issue market gets to be kind of curated, or some money comes out of creators, comes to the creators in that sale. Transfer is interesting. The StubHub analogy, that sounds like somebody just doesn't want to say NFT, but I don't know. So overall, there's some innovative ideas here. I don't think, the idea of basically a comic book goes out in a digital format and then it's not available after a period of time. I have a hard time believing that moves the needle or gets people excited about digital. To me, I think the digital world is going to be a lot more in the a la carte play, or all you can eat play for platforms, as opposed to it's going to be for sale for 1 month and the digital asset's going to disappear, and you're going to want to grab it before it vanishes. But arguably, people will rip and burn it. So the idea of digital collecting in this sense for a comic book, maybe. I mean, people, there's plenty of morons who threw their money away on NFTs, and there is such a thing as digital collectible material, but generally you're talking about that for games or for areas where the collectible itself has some kind of tangential value. I'm not sure that applies here. But anyway, Distillery, I don't know. I can't shake the feeling that it feels like tech bros become comic publisher, and money is there to lose. That's what it feels like. But maybe I'm being way too harsh on that. What do you think? Does any of this sound good to you? Does this sound like how do you parse the innovation versus the normal stuff? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.